Hey, it's Gordon Lucas here, a program manager at Embarcadero Technologies. Today I'm going to give you a sneak peek of Change Manager's upcoming InterBase and Firebird support. Okay, I'm here in Change Manager 5.1.1. This is a development build. The release is upcoming in the fall. First thing you're going to notice when you get the new release is that you can now register data sources of the InterBase and Firebird type. And just like with Change Manager 5.1, you can connect to those databases and browse the database objects. So for example, I can extract a table and start playing with the SQL. The SQL editor has syntax highlighting, so you can see when there are errors. And you can run queries just like you can with the other platforms. Change Manager supports schema compare and archive, database compare and masking, and configuration standards comparison and archives. I'm going to start by running a schema comparison job. What I'm going to use is two InterBase servers. One of them is my local InterBase server, and one of them is the InterBase servers that we have in the lab. So I create a new schema comparison job, and I've drag and dropped my source and my target for the job. The next step is to visit the refinements page. This is where I can select what I want to compare, and we support all of the InterBase and Firebird object types. I'm only going to compare tables and dependencies for this comparison, and if I wanted to, I could refine it even further and select individual tables. I'm going to compare them all. Change Manager has a number of schema comparison options, including your method of synchronization. If you wanted to schedule this job and have it automatic, you can select automatic. Otherwise, we're going to review the results first. You have some options on the objects to include, whether I want to include objects that only exist on the source, that only exist on the target, or include objects that only differ. And you can do some things like ignore column order, ignore text whitespace, and object permissions, and so on. For schema comparison, data comparison, and archive jobs, you can also turn on notifications. So when the job runs, you can send an email to a number of people, or you can put a report in a synchronization script somewhere on your network shares. And you can see a history of the jobs that have been run. So I'm going to run this job. Double click on the title to give myself a little bit more room. And you can see it's cycling through all of the tables and foreign keys and other object types on that InterBase server. And we have a 93% match. So I'm going to look at the individual results. What I have is a tree of the objects that were compared, and over on the right I have a listing of the kinds of results for each object. So for example, I've got one object that will be created on my target, one object that will be changed on my target, and 30 objects that matched. So let's turn off the matched objects, and we can cycle through and look at the objects that were different. So I have a check constraint that's going to be a create. And what this is it's checking that my quantity in stock column is always going to be greater than or equal to 0. And you can see the source DDL and you can see the target DDL. There's no target DDL because this object doesn't exist on the target. And let's look at the address column. You can see that our alter script is doing an alter on two of the columns, street 1 and street 2. And if I'm curious specifically about what the difference is, I can view the differences. This brings up a DDL diff view, and you can see that on my source database, street 1 and street 2 are 100 characters in length, and on the target, they're 60. So I'm going to go ahead and generate a synchronization script. So what I'm going to do is run this alter script, and it's run successfully. To verify the results, you can always rerun your comparison job. And we have a 100% match. Again, using the options, you can set that to automatically happen. So if I had a development database that I was making changes to every day, and I wanted to update, say, a QA database, I could create a Change Manager comparison job with automatic synchronization. It'll make any changes that were found on the development database on that QA database. You can also do a one-to-many job, so I can add more targets, and I can run the comparison of the single source to any number of targets. Okay, next thing I want to show you is a data masking job. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a data comparison job, and I'm going to assign my InterBase lab as a source, and I'm going to assign a Firebird database as my target. Change Manager's next release will support InterBase 2007, 2009, Firebird 1.5, and Firebird 2.0. For masking, you need to enable the automatic synchronization. And just like for schema, in data compare you've got a number of options. If you're comparing data, you can do things like match empty cases and nulls, ignore trailing spaces, but for the auto-synchronization option, it's going to clear the data from the target and replace it with the data from the source, and this enables the masking options. Okay, and once it's gone out and got all of the tables and columns, it pairs them up on source to target. You might see some warnings here. For example, if the target data column is shorter than the source data column for a string, it might tell you that data truncation could occur, or if there's like a check constraint on the target that's not on the source, you may get a warning. You can set the level of those warnings and errors so you can customize how strict you want this mapping to be. So what I want to do is mask some data in my customer table. So I'm going to click on View Column Mapping, and this is where I can see the columns that are paired up. So I can, if the names don't match, I can manually set the columns that I want to move from the source to the target. And then that is obviously saved with the job. So when I rerun this job or I schedule this job, the same settings will be persisted. So just like a schema comparison job, I could set a data masking job or just a data movement job to move data from a source to a target on a regular basis. So Change Manager has two masking rules. The first is shuffle and the second is randomize. So we're going to shuffle the first and last names. And what's that's going to do is when we're moving customer rows over, it's going to pick first and last names from other rows. So the first and last names won't be kept together, and they won't be kept with the same customer IDs. And for the telephone and cell phone, we're going to do the randomize. What the randomize will do is it will replace any character with another character and any digit with another digit. So a telephone number starting with 416 might end up starting with 812 or 937. A name, Gord, might be capital J-A-B-T. Okay, so let's run this job. And again, with the schema jobs, you have the notification option and the history of when those jobs were run. So the job's done. Change Manager's moved and masked just over 2,000 rows, and it took about half a minute. Now if you want to see the results of that job, we're going to turn off automatic synchronization, and this is where you'll be able to review the data comparison results, and you can see that 1,900 rows matched and about 300 didn't match. And I can click on View to look at the tables in my comparison. So all of the tables matched except for the customer table, which had a difference of 348, and you can see that for customer ID 734 on the source it's James Batiste, and on the target it's Reginald Segelbauer. And similar for each of the other rows, the first and last names are randomly assigned. For the telephone numbers and the cell phone numbers, you can see that it's replaced each of the digits with different digits. So 873 became 049. So we've de-identified the customers in our database, and if you're moving data from production or to QA or to development, especially if you want production-like data, this can be a very easy and powerful way to protect the privacy of your data while providing realistic information for QA and development to test with.